Yay Networks.
It's why I say that a panic attack is sort of the orgasm of anxiety. It is the sum, if the orgasm is the maximal expression of pleasure, then a panic attack is the maximal expression of anxiety. It's this like explosion of sensation. Tap the mic. It's this explosion of sensation that sort of ratchets every single fiber of your being.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't forget it.
Welcome back to Happily Ever Amber. I am so excited because I have someone so special on the show today, Matt Gutman. If you don't know Matt, he is an ABC reporter. He has reported on some of the biggest events in our lifetime. And he just came out with a book explaining his panic disorder in a book called No Time to Panic. I came across Matt's story on Instagram. I was really touched and moved because I suffer from panic and depression, and I love the fact that this was a man being so open and vulnerable. I also have experience raising a daughter with severe panic disorder. I love that we're having conversations about this. There's so much, I know, and I feel like I say this every episode, there's so much going on in our world, and there is, and we have to take care of ourselves right now. And by being open and vulnerable and sharing our stories, we could actually help each other. And I love that. And no, you're not going crazy, okay? No one's going crazy. We just have to readjust and align and be grounded, whether it's breath work, taking walks. I mean, the list goes on, and we are going to dive into all of the tips and tricks and psychedelics. We talk about all the things that he has tried. So I hope you guys enjoy this episode. I am so excited to have Matt Gutman on today. Matt, I am so excited you're here. I know I just said it again, but I really am. I just finished your book last night, No Time to Panic. And you know what? I feel like I'm going to start using this as like a mantra. Like I have my go-to mantra for panic, but this is a great, no, there's no time to panic.
What's your go-to mantra for panic?
So during some pretty intense, so when I first discovered that I had panic disorder, and I thought I was dying, which like you describe in the book, a lot of people do. A lot of people think they're having heart attacks. I was in therapy, and she was like, let's just start telling yourself I'm safe. So I would put my hand on my heart. I'm safe. I'm safe. And just saying I'm safe, it just calmed my nervous system down.
Totally.
Yeah. So this is more of a get your shit together. There's no time to panic. And then there's more of the loving version of that.
But there are lots of these self-love versions, right? There's a lot of the tapping, these nodes are very central to the vagus nerve and to the calming. Yes. And we send ourselves messages all the time, right? I am panicking, this is a red alert, pull the fire alarm. Mm-hmm. But we can also try to tame that a little bit with those other messages, which are so simple and it seems so duh, but yeah, I'm safe.
Yeah. I
got this. I'm going to be okay.
That's what I do with my daughter, which we'll get into in a little bit. But first I want to ask you, what inspired you to write the book? I can only imagine how that decision was. It must have been really hard because it's really putting yourself out there and being seen in a way that you're not typically seen.
Well, a couple of reasons. The first was that feeling that you had, and I don't know how many times you've experienced it, but when you have panic and it's chronic and it's panic disorder, it's hundreds of times. Mm-hmm. And you want to end that eventually because it's so painful and so distressing. Mm-hmm. So that's one side. And so I made a catastrophic mistake on air in January 2020 reporting on the Kobe Bryant helicopter crash. And when you're in a panic, what happens is your short-term memory goes out the window. I mean, your long-term memory, which is anything longer than 30 seconds, goes out the window. And I basically couldn't separate two things, one which I knew to be reportable and one which I wasn't sure. And in the moment, I just didn't have the brainwave. I made a terrible mistake, and I was suspended for a month. So, suspension has a way of opening up your schedule. And at that point, my wife and I decided that like, either I quit this business because it's driving me crazy and I'm miserable all the time. And I've got all these weird like safety behaviors with my magical underwear and smoking and doing weird calisthenics and showing up late and all these crazy madcap things to try to avoid having a panic, which aren't working.
Do those become like OCD? Because I imagine some of the things, like even the tools that I have, I'm like, okay, where's the fine line of like certain rituals to like prep for a moment and then keeping away from the dependable, like you're codependent on those.
Those are called safety behaviors.
Okay.
And so people with panic develop these safety behaviors, which eventually are unsafe behaviors because they're only priming your brain to think that you're about to have a panic. Like, oh, Matt's starting to do his calisthenics. He's smoking a cigarette now. Oh, this morning he woke up and he put on his lucky underwear thinking that they're going to make it panic proof. So I had this, years, 20 years of suffering through this.
It started in college, right?
It started in college.
With your thesis.
Yeah.
Right.
And if anybody's ever, the first panic attack, it's like losing your virginity. It's like something you don't forget, right? Like,
no, I was sharing with our producer Riley a couple of my first panic attacks, and it's like I can't tell you what I did yesterday or my schedule.
Right.
My memory is we're working on it. But when you have a panic attack, boy oh boy, those sensations that like the physical and it's something you never forget.
It's why I say that a panic attack is sort of the orgasm of anxiety. It is the sum, if the orgasm is the maximal expression of pleasure, then a panic attack is the maximal expression of anxiety. It's this like explosion of sensation. I tap the mic. It's this explosion of sensation that sort of ratchets every single fiber of your being.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't forget it. And so like my first one in college, I felt like I'd like cats clawing at my neck. I was sweating. I couldn't see. I thought I was falling through the floor delivering this talk to my fellow students. And it wasn't even graded. Like there was nothing writing on this thing. And yet I had this like earth-shattering, horrific panic attack. And I never talked about it for like 15 years because I was so ashamed and so shocked, even though I had many after that. Anyway, fast forward to after the Kobe Bryant fiasco and my mistake. It was really the straw that broke the camel's back because this had been building up for a long time. And I decided I had to fix me or I couldn't keep doing this because I was miserable. And it was affecting my work. So I basically started to do that. And I learned everything I could about anxiety and panic and the chemicals in our head that make these incredibly painful but also important experiences, sensations happen. Then I went to this evolutionary psychology and psychology thing. I was like, well, okay, I'm broken, but I wasn't really. But at the time, I thought I was broken. How do I fix me?
Yeah.
Why do humans even have this genetic trait of panic?
Right, you have to learn the history of the biology. If you're a science person, I don't know, but for me, I always start with science, and then I'll go into these like spiritual, what people call like LA, like woo-woo stuff. That's kind of what you have to go to. Like, I want data.
Yeah.
Like, why?
Okay, so did you ever ask, like, why is it this is so unhealthy? Why do humans even have panic
I don't want to. So to answer your question, I don't want to cut you off. For me, it started after my divorce. I had like a complete. I don't know if it was like a meltdown or a break. I needed to go to a place. I went to this rehab called PCS, and they referred me. Once we had talked about the trauma and things that happened in my marriage, we got into really the history of my life, like being in the womb and what happened generations before, where were my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and how that all the genetics affected my genes of who I am. Is it something that I was born with? Because I was like...
It sounds woo-woo, but it's not. It's science. We are imprinted with the genetic experience of our ancestors, our grandparents, our parents.
Yes, so I did this trauma egg, and it's crazy. It will just like go through the history of like, my mom was a very young mom, and my father grew up very poor, and so there's just a lot of these little events that led of who I was, and when I was born,
Hold on, what's the trauma egg? What's the egg part?
Gosh, you know what? See, this is where the memory part is. It's basically an egg, and it shows you like write in the egg all of the different things that you have gone through in your life, even if it was like, this person touched me inappropriately in second grade. This person did this. My mom, like, this is the trauma I had with my parents. This is the trauma I had with my husband. This is like, you just go through all of the trauma, and then you kind of like, it gives you a relief of like, okay, now let's do some inner child work. Like, what would you say to that 7-year-old little girl? Like, write her, one of the most healing things that I've ever done is writing myself a forgiveness letter, learning to forgive myself, because we're so hard on ourselves. And so after PCS, one of the things that they recommended I do is go to the Amen Clinic, which I definitely want to have a conversation with you about. I don't know if you know who Dr. Amen is. Okay. So I was like, I want to see data. What is wrong with my brain, right? So I went to the Amen Clinic, and it was just like relief. It was just like I could take a deep breath knowing that my feelings were validated. I wasn't going crazy. I wasn't dying. And then I could heal my brain, because now we know that there's neuroplasticity. We know that there's things that we could do from, whether it's pharmaceutical or through meditation and breath work and these like literal, like daily practices that we could take to help heal ourselves. And so it just started that journey. And then last year I went and had my brain scanned again to see the data. What I was doing, was it helping? Was it, so, and there was a huge difference in my brain scan, and it's still, it's still a daily practice. I'm going through really bad anxiety again out of nowhere. Like, no, what was it, a week ago, Riley? I woke up and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't swallow. So that's a new symptom with my panic that I've never had. It happened one other time when I was walking across the street on Ventura Boulevard with my kids. I couldn't swallow. And you're just like, swallow, Ambyr. But that it wasn't a typical panic attack. Normally I feel my legs go numb and I get like a little dizzy. So that's where I was.
I've been there, yeah. Well, yeah. I'm glad that you found healing. And yes, like, I've had lots of psychiatrists and practitioners of the psychedelic who work on increasing our neuroplasticity, which is the malleability in the brain, right? So like they describe it as, so for folks listening, neuroplasticity, it's like a massive ski slope, right? Our brain is like a ski slope, and we've been skiing down it for years and years. And we ski down the same exact routes. And those routes create ruts. And we're stuck in those routes, and we can't get out of these similar patterns that we've been into. So with certain techniques, and for me it was psychedelics, but it can be meditation, which works a little bit slower, but is also a great path to it, mindfulness, but typically, psychedelics is sort of the bullet train to neuroplasticity.
See, I haven't tried any psychedelics, and I'm eager to, but I have kids, so it scares me.
So the psychedelics basically provide a fresh coat of snow. So you can ski down and create new pathways, and that's the neuroplasticity. And psychedelics do not make you crazy. I've tried pretty much all of them at this point.
I know. Oh my God.
They're not all pleasant. And it's not.
You've tried everything under the sun.
So like, to come back to your original question, which is like, why did you write this book?
Yeah.
I didn't set out to write a book. I set out to fix me, to try to find some help. And then I realized in more than a year in, the people who suffer from panic are undersupported, are underrecognized, and underserved. And that there was a constituency of greater than one. It's not just me out there. There are lots of people. And the more I looked, the more I found. And it's not just Ambyr. It's people in the supermarket. It's multimillionaire CEO people that I know who tell me about their panic attacks waking up in the middle of the night. it's teachers, it's artists, it's directors, it's everybody in every walk of life. And especially in the arts. And so I was just shocked. And so statistically, we're talking about it, right? So statistically, we know that about 28% of Americans will experience a panic attack in their lifetime. But that was in 2006. In 2006, I had panics by then for 6 years. If you had surveyed me, I would have said with real honesty that I'd never experienced a panic attack because I didn't even know what was hitting me. I didn't know what it was. So I think, and psychologists in the field of panic are pretty much in agreement on this, the actual incidence of the lifetime incidence of panic is probably closer to 50%. 1 in every 2 Americans will likely experience a panic attack or symptoms of panic once in their lifetime. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot.
I didn't realize how many people. And you mentioned the heart attack. Like this stat blew me away. 40% of people presenting at the nation's ERs with chest pain are experiencing a panic attack because the symptoms so closely mimic a heart attack, right? It starts, some people feel numbness in the arm, dizziness, you can't breathe, it feels like someone's strangling you, you feel tightness in your chest, your heart's pounding, it's coming out of your chest, you think you're dying of a heart attack. People have derealization, there are experiences of people think that they're dying, that they're actually thinking they're dying.
Yeah.
I get
and that's not
fear
good
of loss of control.
Yeah. I was just going to say that's not good when you're on the plane. I've had 2 panic attacks on the plane, and this was very early on, and it's very scary being on a plane because it's like I'm claustrophobic, and so for me it was like when it happens, there's no letting you out, and I was like, get me off of this, and I feel like mine really got bad when I got pregnant with my second child. For whatever reason, the chemistry, it made it so bad. But I
mentioned this in the book as well. We all say, oh, come on. Like, we all know that fear of flying is ridiculous, right? It doesn't make any logical sense. But is that really true? Like, if you actually think about flying, if you think about driving, okay, we're up 5 to 7 miles in an aluminum tube with 200 or 300, depending on how big the plane is, other people who are spewing germs flying at 500 miles an hour in the stratosphere.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
It's crazy.
It's bonkers.
Even when I'm up there, I'm like,
what?
Wow. I'm flying and I'm like above the ground. It's a very...
How does even stay aloft if you don't know thermo and aerodynamics?
I feel like I'm also, because I'm a very spiritual person, when I'm flying, I really take in like the mountains and I'm up. I just go into this other like mental state and I'm just like, wait, what?
Pregnancy is scary. We forget that we're animals, that we're human animals who for tens and tens of thousands of generations evolved with pregnancy being a very possible signal of impending death for the mother, right? Before hospitals, before C-sections. If a pregnancy went bad, the mother is dead. So yes, it should be anxiety provoking. Pregnancy can be massively scary.
I had another child previously when I was 22 and I was fine. It was fine. And that's the thing. It just hits you. So you're like, what happened?
Because we're programmed also to have this crazy dissonance, to be able to go through life and not fear everything all the time. Like driving. Driving is the single deadliest thing that humans do. Age 18 to 54.
But why don't I have anxiety when I drive?
Because we can't live without driving, basically. So we have to fool ourselves into thinking, oh, it's actually safe when it's really not.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, like statistically, you're much more likely to die driving than you are flying. More people have fear of flying than driving. We do a lot of things that don't make sense, but we do it because we've got to get on with life.
That's true. So one of my favorite stories in your book is after when you went to Alaska, right? You went to Alaska?
People love that.
Okay, knowing that you have panic, okay? You go on these crazy adventures. Like not for your work, right? You just like, you must be a outdoorsy, you love nature, you love, and I understand that. I do too. But to put yourself in such a vulnerable situation, I was dying when I was reading that chapter. I was like, Matt, what the hell were you thinking? So can you share that story for the viewers?
I was thinking the same thing, Matt. What the hell are you thinking? This was during my suspension, and I went to Alaska to work for just a few days. I was actually trying to option a book about a family of sled dog owners, or anyway. And so I spent some days like cleaning up the kennels. There are lots of poop and pee, which is frozen solid in
Which is not
February in
a
Alaska.
bad, not a bad thing.
No, I really liked it. It's so much easier to clean up the poop and the pee. They're like these perfect little discs. Anyway, I said goodbye to them, and I drove down on the Alaskan highway from Fairbanks, which is really far north and really close to the Arctic
That's
Circle.
where my sister went to college.
No way.
Yeah, she played basketball in Fairbanks. Yeah, that's a whole other story.
And it's a whole other story. Wow. But beautiful. And I actually liked it in February. It was cool. Anyway, and I drove down, and on the way from Fairbanks, where I was, to Anchorage, where my flight was a couple days later, was Denali. I'm like, I gotta stop in Denali. And I looked up this trail app, and it had a couple hikes, and one of the hikes is this side mountain, Mount Healy. And I guess I didn't look closely enough at the directions, but anyway, I start chugging uphill, and I felt like it was doable.
Wait, sorry to interrupt. Was there like a sign that says like hiking path?
Yeah, in the start, but then the path, because of the snow, petered out, and like I went farther than other people had gone, and there was no path, and I wasn't at the summit, so I didn't know what to do. So I'm like, okay, I see the summit, it's up there somewhere. I don't see a path. I'm just gonna scramble uphill. So I just went directly up on all fours for a while, and got there, and it was like this amazing. Like I have pictures, I can show them to you.
Oh yeah, I heard about the pictures. That's one thing I want to see the pictures.
It was like out of a Jack London book. It was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen, and I'm soaking it in, and I'm literally feeling high off of nature and endorphins because I'd just been hiking uphill for an hour and change, or an hour and a half, and it was like spectacular.
And by the way, you only have, just for the viewers, you only have like 3 bars and like a little water.
2 protein bars and a little water.
Okay.
But I didn't think
I would have been bringing Benadryl. I would have had like a backpack of like first aid.
Never know, you could get a bee sting, but
I
no.
know.
And I was nature drunk. And so I started coming downhill, and I couldn't find the trail because I didn't take the trail on the way up. And I started thinking, okay, I'm going to come down the mountain like a spiral staircase. And at first the snow was deep, but like doable. So it was up to my knees, and I was kind of like flopping and flipping down the hill, which was really fun. And I'm like, wee! Literally nature drunk. It's a thing. And then the snow gets deeper, and it's harder to tumble. And then it's like hip deep, and then waist deep, and then chest deep. Suddenly I'm trudging down, and I can't get out of the snow, and it's above my head. And it feels like it's this cold quicksand.
And then now are you thinking like, oh shit? Like at that point, are you like the anxiety is like coming on a little bit?
Yeah, you start to feel the, and you're like, your carotid artery is like, jamming against your throat. And I'm like,
Yeah.
And I've been sweating heavily because I went uphill. So like I had all these layers going up, and I've been unzipping, going down. And I'm thinking, oh man, it's late in the afternoon. It's like I maybe have 40 minutes before it gets dark, and now I'm stuck, and I did something really dumb, and I'm in the folds of this mountain, and I can't get out, and the snow's above my head, and it's so fine that it was like dust, so I couldn't dig. I couldn't tunnel under, and I couldn't go over, and every time I dug, it filled back in. So I was making extremely slow progress, and I basically had a panic, or adrenaline.
Yeah.
And my body's like, you start to feel it. And it gave me an idea, actually, because when you have a panic, it stimulates your stress response, which is not great when, in my business, you're standing in front of a camera. Mm-hmm. But it's great when you're out in the middle of nowhere because your internal GPS kicks in. You're getting this surge of energy to your muscles, which helps you dig faster. You're thinking in different ways than you'd normally be thinking. And so immediately I thought about the snowshoe hares that I've been seeing. Yeah. Like, oh, they go over the snow. So how do I go over the snow or on top of the snow? Snowshoe hare, like snowshoes. Okay. So I saw like a spruce nearby, and I like scrambled over it, which took me a while. And then I started like snapping off all the branches from the spruce and tucked them into my pants and my shirt and my jacket and my sleeves. And I'd become like this walking Christmas tree, or like, those car fresheners you have in your car.
Oh my gosh.
And I start to like try to go on top of the snow by swimming on top of it. And eventually, like, a while later, I finally get out of the deep part and I scramble back onto where I found the trail because, again, your internal GPS is working. And I was like a shipwrecked sailor making it to shore.
And at that point, at some point during that journey down the hill, you sent your wife a video, or you recorded?
No, I recorded it. I never sent it. And to the kids.
Oh my God.
I'm like, I'm so happy. I love you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they've never seen it.
Your wife must you must get home and your wife's like, enough. I can't even imagine. Your poor wife is just.
I don't know. So the question is, do people who've experienced trauma in their lives need to experience life at a greater intensity? And I feel like I do. And by the way, for those watching, listening, I'm going back to Tel Aviv tomorrow to cover the Israel-Gaza war. And I'm always, and people say, aren't you tired of it? I'm like, no, I don't know why. I'm always attracted to the intensity, of where life is grating against death, where people are living their most intense lifestyles and periods in their lives. It feels like it's important. It feels like it gives life meaning. And maybe that's
humanity.
my own little craziness. I don't know. But I definitely am attracted to that intensity. One of the things that so surprised me in starting to do the research for the book, well, it wasn't the research for the book, it was trying to find a support group for me, was that there are no panic attack support
Oh my God,
groups.
there's none. There's none.
3 in the country.
There's none. Yeah.
And I couldn't believe it. And it's just very upsetting that people who experience this don't really have sources for help. We hear about AA, right? And people who are alcoholics typically tend to explode, right? They're in traffic accidents. They have explosive fights with family members or loved ones. Financial meltdowns.
Yeah.
People with panic often just implode. They go inward and it's so silent and quiet. And so they become agoraphobic and they don't go out of their house and you don't hear about them and they don't ask for help and they're not pleading. And so I felt like they didn't have a voice. And so that's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, is to give those people advice. Not that I actually offer that much advice. It's more about my experience and things that you can do. But I don't have all the answers because nobody does.
Well, and you say that in the book at the end.
There are answers, but I don't have the answer.
Yeah, of course. And I don't think there is a answer. I think it's like a pie. You just kind of have to figure out what your toolbox is, and knowing, okay, if I'm having, I wake up with anxiety, okay, what am I going to do? I know I could go for a walk. I could do a breathing meditation. I could, before you
limit caffeine. Sorry.
I know.
I am too.
That's my thing. Caffeine.
But it definitely increases anxiety.
I know. And Dr. Amen,
he's big anti-caffeine, also against alcohol.
I haven't drank in 3 years.
Very impressed.
It's hard.
Is it because you're sober or do you choose not to drink?
I choose not to drink. I think it's just it's not good for me. I'm not, I literally, when I drink, I'm not this life of the party and I'm not dancing on the tables. I'm not doing any of that. I'll just kind of it will bring out my depression, I feel a little bit. Or I'll want to go to sleep, right? I'll have a glass of red wine and I'm okay, let's just I imagine it's someone who smokes weed, which I've only done once and it made me really paranoid. I heard voices. It was fucked up. I don't ever want to do weed again. And that's why I want to stay away from the psychedelics, because I'm I don't even know where that would take me. But honestly, have you tried, I don't know if you said this in the book, but have you tried microdosing?
Yes, but not in any clinical fashion. I've tried it myself, but not with a practitioner who's guiding me. So I wouldn't say it was in any scientific way. I really like it because I do mini, well, not micro, above micro and less than macro. Okay. So I actually feel it. So it's nice. You're going through the day and you're yeah, it's good. It's typically on the weekends, people, with my kids. But yeah, no, I like it. But just to go back to alcohol for a second. So I am the life of the party when I drink. Okay. And it brings out I'm already pretty up. And when I drink, I'm even more up, which can actually be a lot. And I really like it. And this summer I'm not So this summer I was promoting the book, and there was so much more scrutiny than I expected because I suddenly had producers and people coming out of the woodwork once I announced that the book was out. They'd be like, "Are you having a panic attack? Really? You have panic attacks? Is it happening now? How about now? Really? You can have one now? Really?" And it was like in my face.
Yeah.
And it was so intense that I started getting really anxious. And so I upped my like mindfulness and meditation, just like walking down the street or doing the dishes or doing anything. I tried to limit my caffeine. Like I was like a pot a day. So now I'm like a cup or two cups probably. And I cut out alcohol. And it really helped. And I'm like a 1 drink a night guy, but I'm like, yeah. And it really helped because it like had this residual anxiety hangover. Wasn't hungover in any way, but I didn't feel good. And when I stopped, I noticed the absence of the presence of something. And it really helped. So like, that is not the answer that people want to hear. Like the $1 million answer for getting rid of panic. But what Ambyr is saying and what I'm saying too is that it really does help mitigate the chances of getting a panic attack or having that anxiety experience, that anxiety attack, if you will, that is so debilitating.
Yeah.
Like it really does help. And there are all these little things that we can do in our day to day.
Like what's your go-to in the middle of the day, right? You know, after this, you're leaving, you're going to cover a story. It's starting to come on. What do you, what's your go-to? Like a tool? I don't know.
I like a mindfulness technique that I use frequently, and it works on the 5 senses. So I first think of, I look around and I see 5 things that I see, but I try to pick things that are pleasing to the eye. You know, the flowers, little roses on your table, maybe the sort of Giacometti statue type thing there, the way the light bounces off the leaves on the hedges across the street, things like that, flowers, things that make me happy, that are pleasing. Then it's 4 things. So it's 5 things you see, 4 things you hear, which is actually challenging and is fun because you're trying to like, you sift through your auditory input, and then it's 3 things you sense. So the shoes under my feet, my back against the couch, coffee in my lap. 2 things you smell, 1 thing you taste. And if you go through that, generally it will help avoid that massive anxiety because your brain is too busy thinking about the other stuff. Yeah, and it can't multitask that well. Yeah,
so I shared with you when I first met you that I have a child who suffers from severe panic. And it's been extremely challenging. That is one of our favorite things to do. And that when she is in a panic, that's the only thing that I could do to help her be other than tell her it's going to pass, right? Because having experience, and I'm grateful that I have these experiences because I know I could empathize with her as her mom, like going, okay, it's going to be over, but let's distract ourselves. Okay, go. 5 things you see. Okay, 4 things you hear. Like
And she cooperates with that.
Yes. And because it's
great.
In the beginning, she would be resistant. So maybe it was only 4 things you see, and we would, just have to minimize
still, right?
it.
Better than nothing.
But then she realized that it helped. It helped shorten the time, and it was the distraction. So that's a great one. Yeah. It's a really, really, really a good one. Okay, so.
It's also something that you can do, and people don't know you're doing it. You're just like taking in the world around you. You know, there's this other thing with the pen that you sort of focus on the pen, then you focus on the thing beyond it, then the pen. Oh. And the switching of the focus. What are those? Remember those? They were big when we were kids, or I was a kid. The images that had sort of a hidden image behind if you changed your focus.
I can't do those.
I could not.
Those make me. My sister could do them, and I'm like, what the hell is wrong with me?
What are they called? There's a name for it.
I don't know, but I know what that is.
Okay, so it's that.
Now I'm going to have to go and buy some and see if I could do it as an adult. That makes me crazy.
It's a good idea, actually, except it'll make us crazier. But anyway, it's that thing that the focus on one thing and then the focus on something else that sort of, again, stimulates the vagus nerve and takes your mind off of it. But that's a little weird to do in public. But looking around and hearing and smelling and feeling,
so
nobody notices.
I have a Slinky. I don't know why. Like the fidget tools, there's a lot of fidget tools that don't work for me for whatever reason. the slinky calms me down. I don't know if it's the back and forth. Also, Dr. Amen taught me this. You could do this in public. This is the
What's
same.
this?
This is the same
it's like
thing.
tapping?
It's the same thing as
Right.
tapping.
This is great.
Yeah.
I love the tapping.
Yeah.
But again, you can't
Or
like
this.
Yeah.
It's this too. So those are my
It's funny, these are all self-soothing techniques that probably humans have been doing for thousands of generations without knowing that it's self-soothing, right? But now we're more aware of it.
Yeah. Do your kids know that you have panic?
Oh yeah, of course. Everybody knows.
Well,
And
they're
knew
young though, right?
9 and 15.
Oh, okay.
And so when this whole thing started, they were 5 and barely 5 and 11. Sorry. Yeah, and they still, they were. I think my son wasn't super aware, but he was pretty aware.
Yeah.
And I'm open about it. And they've never seen it happen because it pretty much only happens on air. For me, everybody's got different triggers. For me, it's the expectation of perfection.
Yep.
Right? That's what I can't handle. So, which is why, like, if I'm in a, people ask, oh, how do you go to war? No, that's easy. Because if you're reporting live from a war zone, there is no reasonable expectation of perfection or flawlessness.
No.
Your performance has to be dirty because, like, nobody can operate like that. But for me, that makes it so easy because there's no expectation of perfection. So I perform flawlessly. But standing in front of a camera, when all you have to do is deliver 10 seconds or 15 seconds of copy, and like how anybody could do that, how could you possibly mess that up? That to me is terrifying.
I'm the same way. And I think that's why I love this book so much, because there's so many things in here that you talk about that are like, it's almost things that I would only share in my diary like you did, right? That people would think that I needed to be in like a mental institution or something,
Totally.
which most people back in the day probably would admit themselves. But it's just,
Did you ever have magical underwear?
no, I didn't.
I think I may be
Yeah,
unique in that department.
You
Again,
want-
but things like people that you would only mention in your diary and that people would think you're insane for.
Yeah, you one up me with underwear thing.
The thing is, we keep all this stuff secret, and I kept it secret for 20 years. Like, it was so secret that I even wrote about it cryptically and in shorthand in my own journal, which I later couldn't read because I'd written it so cryptically to keep the secret from myself. And so now there's been this, like, now I'm like, blah. I'm telling everybody everything all the time.
Yeah. But it's also healing
don't
to
have a
talk about it,
choice.
right? It's like grieving, right?
Exactly.
They say like when you grieve a loss of a loved one or you go through anything traumatic in life, you don't want to talk about it, but once you start and you keep replaying those stories, there's something healing in that process, which is nice, right?
Totally.
Feels really good. So, okay. Well, I know you have to like go report and then you're going back to Israel. Thank you so much for coming over.
for having
And
me. It was so
honestly,
great.
guys, this book, you need it. If you have panic disorder, just know you're not alone. And if you have a loved one who has panic, you need to read this so you understand where they're coming from. So where can people purchase No Time to Panic?
Anywhere you buy books. So online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you prefer buying books, or independent booksellers if you choose. That's lovely too. We love those.
Yeah.
I just want to hit upon one thing that you just said, which is so important. You are not alone. Anybody who experiences panic, you are not alone. Panic also is fleeting. It's short. It only lasts between 15 and maximum 90 seconds. And we can get through that. And there are things you can do to both limit the chances of getting one and to get over it. None of it's easy, but it's definitely not a death sentence.
Thank you again for coming on. For people who want to follow you, where can they follow you on socials? And
Yeah, on Twitter and Instagram at Matt Gutman,
You're on
ABC.
Twitter?
I am, but I don't do it that much because it's a scary place.
yeah, I'm not on Twitter either.
Well, I have Twitter. I don't post a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So social media, I will also post for you guys to follow and then pick up No Time to Panic. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Ambyr.
You guys, I can't even imagine me being stuck in snow up to my head trying to figure out how the hell to get out. Wow. Matt's story when he went to Alaska was definitely my favorite story in this book. And you know what I learned is that two things. there's no quick fix to anxiety. You can't take a psychedelic. Yes, there are things that you could do to help improve the neuroplasticity, but there's no quick fix to anxiety. The other thing that I learned is you have to laugh, right? We can't take life so seriously. Yes, shit happens, but honestly, right now I'm just debating whether I should take the toad venom or the mushrooms. I don't know. And I love to hear if you guys have any stories about psychedelics, please share, because I'm a virgin when it comes to those things, and I'm really excited to maybe explore. But at the end of the day, just try to find those little moments of just even laughing at yourself, making fun of yourself. You know, if things get too heavy, throw on a comedy show. That's what I've been doing lately. And honestly, laughter is the best medicine. So anyways, thank you, Matt, so much for coming on. Please don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Spotify, all the platforms, which the list is very long, so I'm not going to say. I will just link them here. And I hope you guys have a great day.
Yay Networks.